Introduced by Republican Congressman Mike Rogers in November of 2011, the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act, or its catchier acronym CISPA, is a pending amendment to the National Security Act of 1947. As cyber threats were previously unaddressed within this act, CISPA mandates provisions for the beefing up of the United States defense infrastructure, specifically in regard to cyber terrorism. But how do these otherwise unnoticeable facts affect America as a country and you and me as citizens? What could be assumed to be a simple question deserves an answer, but it's quite complex. Whilst this bill's syntax may establish itself as rational or utilitarian, it clearly violates your First and Fourth Amendment rights concerning privacy, freedom of speech, and the ownership of property. So glaring are the holes in this act that they must be pointed out. In the name of internet security, in one way or another, acronyms worthy of James Joyce have been flaunted in recent years: SOPA, PIPA, and now CISPA. CISPA has caused a similar, if somewhat smaller, reaction on the internet to the one caused by SOPA. These ideas, however, are very disparate. SOPA dealt mainly with piracy, while CISPA is all about security, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. CISPA, as its deciphered acronym states, is a protection or security act. As many reports, pretty graphs, and statistics reveal, China is the biggest threat to America's woefully underprepared networks, private and public sector alike. So will this new act protect our nation's secrets? Well, no. To start with, the bill gives the government and private sector the ability to snoop an individual's browsing information, and to do so without much in the way of oversight. As such, the lack of safeguards in relation to civil liberties and basic confidentiality rights leave us, average Joes, without much say in the way our private and personal information is handled. The federal government isn't shy to this fact. Although President Obama preferred the language in an earlier draft and promised to veto the bill if it remained in its current form, it is by no means a guarantee. In its current form, the act will allow the government to use unprecedented levels of surveillance, and the handling of user information is akin to you opening your neighbor's mail. This Orwellian mandate will allow normal computer users to be spied upon for nothing more than the illusion of protection. Whether it be protection for the Joes, the fat cat corporations, or bigwig lawmakers on a hill, it's a meager disguise to justify huge budgets which must be spent. And if a number of companies such as Facebook, AT&T, and Microsoft who support this act can use and abuse our private data and sensitive information so cruelly, why shouldn't they do the same to theirs? It's quite simple. They'd be out of business. And if the government can accumulate this level of data and release it as they please, why not simply publicize all off-the-record governmental information which is harmful for public consumption? Because they'd be out of business too. In the name of security, this bill enables the legalization of the federal government or various companies under contract thereof to closely associate themselves with privately run corporations and security firms as to ease the facilitation, access, and passing of cyber threat information, which the private companies can then pass on to the government without a single shred of accountability, and as a result are immune to all forms of criminal and civil liberty-based litigation. As you can see, your First and Fourth Amendment rights are not an issue for these people any longer. Governments, under strong advisement from friendly private sector companies, can censor or shut down sites without any warning or due process. This expansion of rights for big business and big government leads not only to neo-fascist approaches to many aspects of modern life, but as their rights increase, where do ours go? Since there's no accountability, our rights can only go one place: down the tubes. To watch this video, you have to use a number of programs and applications, all of which have agreements or licenses. Under the proposed bill, anybody using any program to seemingly threaten national security will quickly notice that their user agreements are void. In fact, a plain reading of the act assumes you're guilty until otherwise determined. And worst still, governments and the corporations whom are calling for this amendment need not even adhere to the licenses set out in any EULA, which not only removes your rights to freedom of speech or your right to a private life, but in fact sets a de facto standard of innocent people being portrayed as terrorists before even a word has been spoken in response, rhetoric nor defense. Certain software giants, as I've mentioned a few already, may endorse CISPA as a quick and easy revenue stream to sell the information. Private or incognito browsing will be a thing of the past. Chances are the options will still be there, but certain data will still be collected, and none of this can help protect national security nor your basic rights of privacy. The notable yet empty scaremongering language brings fear to many. Too many people these days are willing to have their once-killed rights chipped away by this type of drip-drop legislation. The use of this terrifying rhetoric is just enough to get the masses wound up to a point where they're not only willing for their freedoms to be taken, but are actively calling for them to be taken. The idea of some 16-year-old Chinese hacker in suburban Xi'an who's able to destroy your 401k and spend your life savings on failing hedge funds is exactly the thoughts of these huge bodies of industry that are willing and able to foster. Chinese hackers, which are the main culprits of cyber threats, steal American intellectual property to compete against the international market. Whilst there are many server farms in China which attack all networks, American and otherwise, they are not designed to threaten American security, and unless enforced by Interpol, US laws do not extend to lands afar nor their citizens in their respective countries. CISPA is so vague and verse that even a strict interpretation of it allows the government any lawful advantage to gain access to computer information from pretty much anybody in American territory. So is browsing suspicious material deemed as an international security threat? And who decides what's threatening? Is browsing the web completely anonymously a threat? Combining this bill's verbiage with another like the Patriot Act would lead to unadulterated, legal, and unlimited wiretapping of our country's 311 million inhabitants. It is only right to take steps to ensure this fire in a theater type legislation doesn't get passed. We need to take precautions against this act and come to an agreeable solution. Limiting the scope and the true definition of what a cyber threat is and its counterpart intellectual property will help all involved to an amicable solution. And if the government and its friendly corporations can file lawsuits pertaining to misuse, then we simple people should be able to do the same in return. But instead of misuse clauses, we'd be able to apply penalties to unrelated use of data. To paraphrase Ron Paul, CISPA is essentially an internet monitoring bill which permits both the federal government and private companies to view your browsing information. Therefore, confidentiality and civil liberty safeguards are nothing more than, by words for once beholden, truths our founders envisioned. There is no proof that this act will curb cyber threats. In this former congressman's view, it's an extremely thin veneer of federal mollycoddling when the truth is that its obvious and true purpose is to sell and swap information. To what end? Only time could tell. In Liberty and Vigilance, my friends, Andrew Demeter reporting on behalf of Press for Truth, signing out.
It's about the next 20 years. 20s and 30s, it was the role of government. 50s and 60s, it was civil rights. The next 2 decades are going to be privacy. I'm talking about the internet. I'm talking about cell phones. I'm talking about health records and who's gay and who's not. And moreover, in a country born on the will to be free, what could be more fundamental than